Imagine a world without money, no coins jingling in your pocket, no banknotes in a wallet. If you wanted to buy something, say, a loaf of bread, you had to trade. Perhaps you would offer a chicken or a small pot of wine. This was the world of barter, and for thousands of years, it worked. But it was also very clumsy. What if the baker didn't want a chicken? What if you thought your chicken was worth 2 loaves, but he only offered 1? Trade was complicated, slow, and often unfair. This was the problem facing the ancient world, and the solution came from a small but very wealthy kingdom called Lydia. Lydia was a powerful kingdom located in what we now call modern-day Turkey. It was a bustling hub of commerce, sitting right on the crossroads of major trade routes between the east and the west. Merchants from Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Greek city-states all passed through Lydia, bringing exotic goods and new ideas. The Lydians were clever traders, but they faced the same old problem of barter. They needed a better way. They needed something that everyone would accept as payment, something with a guaranteed value. The answer, it turned out, was flowing right through a the wheel. Lands down from the mountains and into their rivers. The secret to Lydia's great wealth was a special natural alloy called electrum. This was a mixture of gold and silver that washed down from the mountains and collected in the riverbeds, particularly in the famous Pactolus River. Legend has it that King Midas, he of the golden touch, had washed his hands in this very river to rid himself of his curse, turning its sands to gold forever. This shimmering pale yellow metal was beautiful and rare, making it highly valuable. The Lydians had been using simple, unstamped lumps of electrum for trade for a while, but they were still just lumps. You had to weigh them every single time to know their worth. Around the 7th century BCE, a brilliant and transformative idea took hold. What if someone, a trusted authority like the king, could take these lumps of electrum, weigh them into standard sizes, and then stamp them with a special mark? That mark would be a guarantee. It would say, "I, the king of Lydia, promise that this piece of metal weighs exactly what it is supposed to." Suddenly you wouldn't need scales for every single transaction. You could just count the pieces. This was not just a new object, it was the birth of an entirely new concept. This was the invention of coinage, the very first true money in history. The first Lydian coins were not grand or elaborate. They were small, bean-shaped blobs of electrum, stamped on one side with a simple design. The most common and famous design was the head of a roaring lion. The lion was a powerful symbol of royalty and strength in the ancient Near East. And it was the emblem of the Lydian kings of the Mermnad dynasty. Stamping this lion onto a piece of metal was like the king putting his personal signature on it. It was a declaration. This coin was official, its value backed by the full authority of the Lydian throne. On the other side of the coin was a rough, square punch mark, left by the tool used to strike the metal. Credit for this revolutionary invention is often given to King Al-Layats, who ruled Lydia from about 610 to 560 BCE. He was a powerful and ambitious king who expanded his kingdom and understood the immense power of a standardized currency. Under his rule, the production of these electrum coins became systematic. They were no longer just an experiment, they became the engine of the Lydian economy. Al-Layats' mint produced coins in various sizes, or denominations. There was a full stater, the largest unit, but also smaller fractions, like a third, a sixth, a 12th, and even down to a tiny 96th of a stater. These different sizes were a game changer. A large stater might be used for a major business deal, like buying a cartload of grain or a piece of land. But the tiny fractions, they allowed ordinary people to take part in this new money economy for the first time. You could now buy a single loaf of bread or a jug of oil with a tiny coin without the fuss of barter. This made daily life and local markets run much more smoothly. Historians believe Al-Layats may have issued these coins initially to pay his soldiers, or mercenaries, a practice that would help spread the idea of money far and wide. The lion on the coin was not just a royal seal, it was a masterpiece of early art. The early designs show a lion's head, sometimes with a distinctive knob or sun on its nose, its mouth open in a ferocious roar. Later versions under Al-Layats became even more detailed, showing the full forepart of a lion, sometimes facing another animal, like a bull. Each detail was packed with meaning, a message of royal power and divine authority. This lion told everyone who held the coin that it was backed by the might of the Lydian king, a promise as good as gold, or in this case, as good as electrum. Making these first coins was a purely manual process, a craft that required both strength and precision. It all started with the raw electrum. First, the metal had to be heated until it was molten. Then, a precise amount of the liquid metal was poured or dropped onto a flat surface, perhaps an anvil, to create a small blank disc called a flan. The coin maker, or minter, had to be incredibly skilled to get the weight of each flan just right, especially for the tiny fractional coins. This initial stage determined the coin's value, so accuracy was everything. The blanks were then allowed to cool and solidify into their characteristic lumpy, bean-like shape. Next came the most crucial step, the striking. The minter would take a cooled flint and place it on top of a die. This bottom die, called the anvil die, was typically made of bronze or hardened iron, and had the main design, the lion's head, carved into it in reverse. The detail on these dies was remarkable, especially considering the simple tools available at the time. The die cutter was a true artist, engraving every feature of the lion's mane and teeth into the hard metal. This die was the master copy, the source of the coin's identity and its guarantee of authenticity. Once the blank was positioned on the anvil die, the minter would take a second tool, a simple punch, and place it on top of the flan. This punch was usually a square or rectangular bar of metal with a rough, undecorated surface. Then, with a heavy hammer, the minter would deliver a single powerful blow to the top of the punch. This immense force drove the soft electrum of the flan into the carved design of the die below. It was this violent strike that simultaneously imprinted the lion's head on the front and left the characteristic incuse, or sunken square mark, of the punch on the back. This hand-striking process is why no two ancient Lydian coins are exactly alike. The flans were irregularly shaped, the strike might be off-center, and the force of the hammer blow could vary. Some coins are sharply struck with a perfect lion, while others are blurry, or only show part of the design. These imperfections are not flaws, they are the fingerprints of history. They tell the story of a human hand, in a smoky workshop over 2,600 years ago, striking a blow that would create, not just a coin, but a revolution that would forever change how human beings interact and trade with one another. The Electrum coins were a brilliant start, but they had one major flaw. Electrum is a natural alloy, and the ratio of gold to silver in it can vary. One lump of Electrum might be 70% gold and 30% silver, while another might be 50-50. This meant that two coins of the exact same weight could have different intrinsic values, a fact that astute merchants would have surely noticed. The ultimate perfection of coinage would have to wait for Alyatis's son, the legendary king Croesus, who ascended to the throne around 560 BCE. His name would become synonymous with immense wealth, and his contribution to money was just as valuable. Croesus embarked on a groundbreaking monetary reform. He decided to abandon Electrum altogether and issue coins in separate pure metals, one set of gold and one set of silver. This was possible because Lydian metallurgists had developed a sophisticated refining process, likely using salt, to separate the gold from the silver in the Electrum ore. This was a technological breakthrough. For the very first time in history, a government issued a true bimetallic currency, where the value of each coin was based on the purity of its metal, which was now consistent and guaranteed. These new coins, known to history as crosides, featured a new design. The front, or obverse, showed the confronted foreparts of a lion and a bull. The lion, as before, symbolized the power of the king. The bull was another symbol of strength, and some scholars think the pairing might have represented a union of powers or a cosmic balance. The back of the coin still had the two simple square punch marks, a link to the earlier Electrum issues. These coins were produced in a range of standardized weights, with a gold stater being equivalent in value to a set number of silver staters. The purity of the crosid coins was world-renowned. A gold crosid was trusted everywhere, from the shores of Greece to the heart of the Persian Empire. This reliability supercharged international trade. A merchant no longer had to wonder about the gold content of a Lydian coin. He knew it was pure. This innovation made King Croesus fabulously wealthy, but his reign was not to last. In about 546 BCE, the rising power of Persia, led by Cyrus the Great, swept into Lydia. After a decisive battle, the Lydian capital of Sardis was captured, and Croesus became a prisoner. The kingdom of Lydia was no more. Though the kingdom of Lydia fell, its most powerful invention, coinage, was unstoppable. The new Persian conquerors were so impressed by the Lydian system that they adopted it themselves. They continued to mint the Croceid coins for a time before introducing their own famous gold coin, the daric, which was heavily based on the Lydian weight standard. The Persians spread the concept of coinage throughout their vast empire, from India to Egypt. The idea of money, born in a small Anatolian kingdom, was now on its way to conquering the known world, carried forward by its conquerors. At the same time, the idea traveled west across the Aegean Sea to the Greek city-states. The Greeks, who were avid traders, quickly saw the advantages of coinage. Cities like Aegina, Corinth, and Athens began to mint their own distinctive silver coins, stamped with their own symbols: a sea turtle for Aegina, a Pegasus for Corinth, and the famous owl for Athens. They took the basic Lydian idea and made it their own, turning coins into expressions of civic pride and artistic beauty. The Romans would later inherit this tradition from the Greeks, stamping their coins with the faces of emperors and spreading the use of money to the furthest corners of their empire. Today, Lydian coins are priceless historical artifacts. Archaeological digs in Turkey, especially at the site of the ancient capital Sardis, have unearthed the very workshops where these coins were made. Hoards of Electrum and Croceid coins have been discovered, giving us incredible insight into the Lydian economy. These precious relics are now held in major museums around the world. From the British Museum in London to the archaeological museums of Turkey, they are not just numismatic curiosities, they are tangible links to the moment the world pivoted from barter to a monetary economy. The Lydian Electrum Coin, that small, stamped piece of metal, is arguably one of the most important inventions in human history. It revolutionized trade, enabled the growth of markets, and allowed governments to tax, pay soldiers, and fund massive projects more easily. It changed the very way people thought about value, wealth, and exchange. Every time you use a coin or a credit card today, you are using a system that has its distant roots in the shimmering sands of the Pactolus River and the genius of the Lydian kings. It was a simple idea that reshaped civilization for